Okay, so let's talk about competency three, focus listening. So I know that when we talk to delegates around focus listening, that quite often this is one where they're like, how good is my listening skills? Yeah. And I think everybody has a bit of an awareness around maybe they could be listening better. And I think that, what's fantastic about having the focus on this is that opportunity to allow yourself to listen, to be okay with being quieter. And I think it's it's quite an invitation that you don't have to fill the space. You don't have to have answers, and that feels really challenging, I think, for people because it's so different again to what you're doing maybe in your day-to-day job role or just in life generally. Is we're so much in that conversational, you say this, I say that, but am I really listening? So I love that about this competency, that it allows people to actually bring some awareness to it again and say, okay, what do we mean by focused listening? What does that actually, what is that for me? Because it's different for everybody again. Um, but a massive skill that it doesn't matter whether you're in a pure coaching scenario or just, with your family, with your friends, or, in interactions at work. If you can develop that skill, I think it's the one that you can really take away and go, God, and I think you get a lot of feedback around that people say that's really opened something up. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember my coach training, this element. I prided myself on being such a good listener. She always came to me. Um, and in that sort of one day, I came out going, I didn't listen to anybody in my life. So it wasn't even just about work for me.
It's really profound, eh?
Yeah, massive. And, that night sat around the dinner table, everyone's talking over it. And I'm just, because suddenly your awareness of nobody is listening.
I agree. I think there's a bit of because I think this is the one that people think they're good at listening.
Yeah.
So when you get that rating of the competencies, it's the one where you bit 50-50, but I think people think they're good at listening. I was the same as you, Sophie, had the same kind of, I'm a great listener, until you then really think about what actually is listening, what's active listening versus the listening we do often in conversation. So this is the one that is a fundamental shift for a lot of people. And it's even just knowing how to listen.
Yeah.
And it is and knowing that leaving space for people is quite helpful, not having to jump in with I've got something to say, but just sitting back and allowing that space for people to speak and to be listened to, and the value that it places on somebody as well, the importance it places on an individual if they're listened to, how much difference it makes. And I know we talk about this in coaching, is that if you just listen to somebody, if you just give them 10 minutes, 5 minutes, how much difference it can make.
Oh, yeah. And it's what we mean by listening. 7% of what we say is verbal. Everything else is the puns, the hesitations, the body language, facial expressions, and actually just giving you. And, we talk a lot in the program, don't we, about coaching leadership, and it's so different from the other styles, and it's that unlearning to relearn in sets. But actually, if you just listen better all of the time in all areas of your life, the benefits are massive.
There's a permissions thing for me as well in coaching around listening, because it can feel quite awkward because we're so used to conversational style of dialogue. To actually then take a moment of silence might be all right for the coach, but the client might be sitting there going like, has the screen frozen, or is everybody okay here? So actually I think it's really quite enriching to take a moment and say, I'd really like us to take a moment of silence. Let's just sit in silence and see what's going on for you and what's going on for me and what that means in the coaching space. Or I'd really love to do a listening exercise. I'm going to set you up and I'm purposefully not going to interrupt you. because I want you to experience the benefit of great listening for yourself, and just contracting that allows the coach then to sort of ease into it in a sense of normality rather than a sense of I'm doing something to you and it all feels a bit weird and no one quite knows what's going on, but actually just calling it for what it is.
Yeah.
Critical.
It's that signposting, isn't it? We call it contracting. We talk about signposting as a leader. I'm going to try something a bit different here. I'm trying to listen better. So you might notice that I'm doing that. I'm consciously trying to do that. And I think those are the, as you say, the unsaids that rather than it feeling a bit like, oh, this is a bit weird, why are they not responding?
Yeah.
It's letting somebody know that what I'm doing is actually listening, and you'll experience something
Very
different.
different, and you see that, don't you, when you're because this competency for me is the one that touches most deeply in the sort of mental health space, because it allows a client to be at one with themselves and to be purely listened to. And if you look at all of the mental health first aid England or Samaritan's work, the silence and the being comfortable to purely be listened to without any answers seems to be the kind of pivotal moment that a client realizes something's going on and then is able to get the relevant help. So for me, holding that space and being okay to hold that space as the coach, am I okay with silence?
Yeah.
Because if we're not okay with silence, we probably don't create silence for others. So that discipline of where am I in that journey,
Yeah, awareness.
and how am I with that, and then how am I able to support others through that, those moments.
But that awareness piece, and you see this with delegates on CWC, is what becomes apparent for them is what's going on in their head and while they're trying to listen. So I know, for myself, it's definitely a skill that I've had to work on around, definitely there was a desire to give advice. I built my identity, my ego was tied up in I'm listening and how can I fix and what advice can I give you? And you see that time and time again with delegates saying, but I could help them and just get it out in there. And then watching them again, be able to dial that down. It doesn't mean that it's not there. And obviously, at times they need that, so it's not that you're going to never give that advice, but that it's that noise in the coach's head that's preventing them from listening because they're trying to fix and work out and diagnose rather than just purely listening. And I think it can be a real relief when you learn to do it. It's really liberating because you're like, actually,
He's not wanting to
yes, no, you're not me. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to create a space for you in service of you. But you've got the answers. You just need the time to find them, and I'm going to create that space for you.
One of my favourite quotes from Nancy Klein, and I know we talk about a lot about her work when we're talking about listening, is what I'm about to say more important than what this person is about to think or say? And I love that because it can really give you that chance to just stop. I'm not going to speak and I'll let this person's thinking continue. That for me is just wonderful to know that by doing nothing, you're doing something.
Yeah.
And the impact of feeling heard in your busy life where you're running from meeting to meeting and kid drop off and after school club and all that stuff. The power is often quite emotional for clients. It really deeply, like, you're actually hearing, you're seeing all of me through your listening.
I think one of the most powerful things is a client hearing themselves say the words for the first time.
Yeah.
And if you're the one doing the talking or interjecting or directing rather than allowing the client self-direction, they don't have the opportunity to hear themselves say the words for the very first time out loud.
Yes.
And once I've said them out loud, they're real, and then I've got a chance to attend to them. And so by creating that sense of listening, it allows them freedom to say it, acknowledge it, and then do something about it, whatever that thing may be.
I think also with this listening competency, and we talk about it on the programme, and until you experience it, is if you listen well, that pressure on as a coach, what am I going to ask? What question am I going to ask? What am I going to say next? Where's this conversation going? If you listen well, it is liberating from I don't need to give advice and I don't need to have an answer, but it's also that liberation of you engage, you listen, the question will come because the conversation will go where it needs to go. So that also is, that importance of, that's why we put the two competencies of listening and questions together. And experiencing that, both being coached in that way and somebody listening to you, which is obviously what we do in the program, but also practicing listening and the magic that happens with that.
And there is a magic, yeah.
Yeah.
Because but I was just reflecting that then is I remember when I was trading, my supervisor saying to me, listen, the questions will come. And I was like, well, how does that happen? Where do they come from? And you need to experience it. So it is that, in a way, there is a felt experience around being present with someone, really holding that space, really listening. And like it just naturally appears where you should go next.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? And I think sometimes, yes, there are great tools and things that you can have as a support, but sometimes you've got to just trust that holding that space will, create.
Let's just acknowledge for people who are watching this video that it is not easy.
No, it's not.
Because it's very easily said, let me create a space, so we'll sit at that sounds as though it's very, very, very simple to do. I actually think it's one of the hardest things to do.
Agreed.
Yeah.
To do it in the right way, with the right level of focus and attention, to create the space, to be comfortable in yourself, for the client to be comfortable in themselves, to let it come.
Yeah.
Because we know, I mean, how many organizations do we work with where they'll say, one of the greatest leadership development needs we've got is listening. Okay, well, that's a regular pattern and a regular story. So it's a human innate behavior that we're trying to jolt and change.
Yeah.
So actually, it's not a normal skill that you just grow like this. It's actually a fundamental it is not an easy competency.
Yeah.
And observing delegates on the program, coaching confidence program, quite often this is one where they are listening, but are they going to the extent that we might want to see? Potentially not. So there is something for me about expanding the practice of listening.
And it remains, I think, certainly for me, my own personal experience is it remains in the conscious competence. And I think part of so if you think Birch's model, some things as you progress as a coach become unconscious competence. This for me is stuck there. And actually it's not a bad thing.
No.
And I think part of it is as well, is because as a coach, you sit and you hold that space, but day to day, you think about how you're having to, the type of listening that you do does vary. And it would be a bit weird if you sit and hold the space and silence with everybody in every interaction you have. Well, yeah.
You can't.
No, you can't. So you're always shifting. And that's why I think it's very intentional for me all the time.
It's a conscious thing.
But for me, it's a gift. I think it's a real gift. And clients will often say that moment was the moment.
Yeah.
No interaction, no interjection, but that was the moment. And that for me felt transformational.
Yeah. So listening is, as a competency, probably the hardest one to crack. Probably never cracked either, in terms of you having to always be conscious and intentional about it. But the competency that if you get it right, for you as a coach, it's a real shift for you as a coach. For your clients, it's that potential transformational moment where you hold the space and hold the silence for them in a way that nobody else has done before.
Super.
Yeah.